Okay, so have you ever thought about all those people who really make things happen but don't always get the credit? You know, the unsung heroes?
Oh, yeah, for sure. History tends to focus on the big names, but it's those behind-the-scenes figures that are often fascinating.
Exactly. And today, we're going deep on one of those figures, Zayd Ibn Thabit. Now, you might not know the name unless you've really dug into early Islamic history, but his story is mind-blowing. And it's all tied to something billions of people interact with today, the Quran.
The Quran. Wow, that's a pretty big deal.
Right. It's easy to just think of it as a book. But have you ever considered the process behind putting it together and preserving it? That's where Zayd Ibn Thabit comes in.
Yeah, I'm guessing it wasn't as simple as just like writing it down.
Oh, not even close.
Hmm.
He was a scholar, a linguist, a judge, and a super close confidant to the Prophet Muhammad. His life is like this amazing mix of intellect, faith, and dedication.
And I imagine his story gives us some unique insight into that whole era, the challenges the early Muslims faced, all of that.
Absolutely. So let's rewind the clock to 6th century. AD Medina Zayd's only 6 years old when his father is killed in battle. His father was a warrior.
Oh, wow. So he grows up without a father in those times? That must have been incredibly difficult.
Yeah, it was. But his mother, Anwar bint Malik, she was something else. She has this vivid dream about the Kaaba and takes it as a sign of Zayd's destiny.
Talk about a powerful mother,
Mhm.
really shaping her son's future.
Right, and that destiny starts showing itself early.
Hmm.
By 11, Zayd's not only literate, which was rare back then, but he's memorized huge chunks of the Quran.
Hold on, 11 years old, and this is before the Prophet Muhammad even arrived in Medina.
Yep, pretty amazing, huh? So this brilliant kid is brought to the Prophet Muhammad. Now, you'd think the Prophet would want him for battle, right? Those were dangerous times.
Makes sense, you need all the skilled people you can get, especially a young guy who already has such devotion.
But instead, the Prophet asks Zayd to learn Hebrew.
Interesting, why Hebrew?
Medina had all these Jewish tribes, so communication was key,
Yeah.
for peace and understanding.
Ah, smart.
So it was a strategic decision.
Totally.
Yeah.
And here's the crazy part. Zayd learns Hebrew in 2 weeks.
What? Are you serious?
Dead serious. Then he picks up Syriac in 17 days and Persian in 16.
This guy's a language whiz. But I guess with that kind of commitment, it makes sense that he also became known for his beautiful recitation of the Quran.
Huh.
He wasn't just memorizing it, he was living it.
Yeah, he believed in understanding, not just knowing the words. Speaking of connections, his wife Jamila was an orphan raised by Abu Bakr, who became the first caliph.
Wow, so their lives were really intertwined. It's like all these threads connecting the early Muslim community.
Right, and talk about intense experiences. Zayd becomes the prophet's scribe, writing down revelations as they happened. There's this one story where he's leaning on the prophet while writing,
Okay, yeah.
and he feels the physical weight of the Quran descending on the prophet. He almost loses his leg.
Whoa, that's heavy, literally. To be that close to divine revelation, it must have been awe-inspiring.
It makes you think, what must it have been like to see those verses revealed, to be trusted with that responsibility? Absolutely. It clearly shaped him. He wasn't just taking notes. He was absorbing this knowledge, reflecting on it, trying to live it.
Exactly. He would recite the Quran slowly to really ponder each word. He even discussed worldly things with the prophet, showing a wide-ranging curiosity.
So he wasn't just a religious scholar. He was interested in the world in all its aspects.
Totally. He had this balance of seriousness and playfulness, too. Approachable, but dignified. A real model for living a well-rounded life.
It's like he understood that faith isn't separate from life. It's woven into everything.
Exactly. But those early days weren't all sunshine and roses. The Battle of Yamama was a real turning point.
Oh, yeah, that was a tough one. Many Quran memorizers were killed, right?
A lot of them. It shook the community. Umar was really worried about losing more of the Quran.
So he pushed for it to be compiled into one book.
Right. He went to Abu Bakr, who wasn't sure at first, but Zayd convinced them it was the right thing to do.
Zayd, wow, he must have been, what, 20 at that time? To take on that kind of monumental task?
Yeah, and he didn't mess around. The process was super thorough. Cross-checking sources, verifying with multiple people who had memorized the Quran.
Talk about a serious peer review process. It shows how much they cared about preserving the Quran's accuracy.
Absolutely. But Zayd's contributions go even further. He also became a judge, settling disputes even between big names like Umar.
So even those in power respected his knowledge and judgment. That says a lot about the society they were building.
It does. And this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
There's so much more to Zayd's story.
I'm ready for it. Let's keep going.
So we were talking about how Even Umar would go to Zayd for judgments.
Yeah, it really shows how knowledge and scholarship were valued back then.
Right. Like imagine if politicians today actually listened to experts more often.
Oh, that'd be something, I know.
But anyway, you mentioned there was another big Quran compilation that Zayd was part
But
of.
yeah, this time it was under Caliph Uthman.
Right as Islam spread, there were different dialects and pronunciations popping up. Uthman wanted a standard version to keep everyone unified. Exactly. So Zayd's back in action leading this huge project.
Yeah.
It's not just accuracy anymore. It's about bringing a whole diverse community together around this one text.
Must have been a ton of pressure.
Oh, for sure. But there's this interesting story during this compilation. A verse was thought to be missing.
Oh, no.
Yeah, Zayd had 2 witnesses confirming it was missing, which was the rule. But then one of the prophet's wives said, wait a minute, there was a 3rd witness.
So he had to redo all that work after being so meticulous the first time?
He did. But it showed, he was humble. He didn't get stuck in his ways. He just wanted to make sure it was right.
That's a good lesson for all of us, I think. It's easy to get attached to being right.
Totally.
Yeah.
But Zayd, it was all about the Quran, not his ego. It's funny how someone who achieves so much isn't that well known.
It's like he was happy to work behind the scenes, making sure the foundation was strong.
Yeah, a true unsung hero. But when he died, oh man, the grief was huge.
I can imagine losing someone like that. It's not just a person. It's like a whole library of knowledge disappearing.
Yeah, exactly. There are these really powerful quotes about his death. Abdullah ibn Umar called him the scholar of the people. And Ibn Abbas said something like, maybe Allah is making me his successor.
Wow, they felt the weight of that loss. Like, who's going to fill those shoes?
It makes you think about, the people in your life who teach you things. What happens when that knowledge is gone?
It's a big question. And there's this beautiful story about Hassan ibn Thabit, the prophet's poet. He was at Zayd's funeral, and he kept saying, who can recite poetry better than me and my son? But who can recite the Quran like Zayd?
That's amazing. Such a powerful tribute. He's basically saying, yeah, I'm a great poet, but when it comes to the Quran, Zayd was the master.
Exactly. It really highlights that deep respect for Zayd's mastery of the Quran. He wasn't just a scholar, he was a guardian of the word.
And his legacy lived on, too. He had several kids, some named after prophets, and his son Kharija became one of the 7 great scholars of Medina.
Like father, like son, huh?
Right. But it's more than that. They said Kharija was like a mirror image of his father. Not just the knowledge, but even his handwriting and how he talked to people.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like Zayd's whole essence was passed down.
So we've covered a lot. Zayd's childhood, his gift for languages, the Quran compilations, his work as a judge, the reaction to his death. It's hard to believe it all fits in one lifetime.
It does make you wonder what lessons we can take from all this. What's relevant to us today?
It's easy to get caught up in all the specifics of Zayd's life, right? But I think what really sticks with me is his dedication to knowledge. Not just like head knowledge, but as a way to make society better.
Totally. We're surrounded by information these days, but Zayd reminds us that real knowledge goes deeper.
Right.
It's about taking what you learn and actually using it to improve the world.
He spent his life making sure the Quran was preserved, that it was accurate, that everyone could access it. And then he went further. Using his knowledge to be a judge, to guide people, to build a foundation for Islamic law.
It's amazing how his life covered such a key period in Islamic history, from the Prophet's revelations to figuring out how this growing community would function. He was there for it all.
It makes you wonder, did he ever imagine the impact his work would have? That billions of people would be reading the Quran, finding inspiration in it all because of what he did.
It really shows the power of just doing something with real sincerity and purpose. We might not all be compiling sacred texts, but it's inspiring to think we can all contribute in our own way.
Absolutely. It's not about being famous. It's about doing the work that needs to be done. Even if it seems small, it all adds up.
And Zayd also shows us how to be humble about knowledge. Even though he was so learned, he was always open to new information. He was willing to change his mind if the evidence was there.
Like that story with the missing verse.
Right.
He could have easily just stuck to his guns, but he wanted to get it right. That's a tough lesson to learn sometimes.
It is, but it's important. And it's not just about having knowledge, it's about living it. Zayd was a great example of that. He didn't just memorize, he reflected. He talked to people, he tried to live by what he learned.
And he was known for being kind and approachable, too. He wasn't some stuffy scholar. He found that balance between serious study and enjoying life.
Yeah, he showed that knowledge without compassion, without being human, isn't enough.
So thinking about Zayd's life, it's inspiring. It makes you realize that learning and character and action, they're all connected.
He really got that. True knowledge changes you. It changes how you think, how you feel, how you act.
So as we wrap up this deep dive on Zayd Ibn Thabit, I'm just blown away by everything he did. He was right there at the start of Islam, and he dedicated himself to making sure it would flourish.
Even though most people might not know his name, he made a huge difference. He's a real example of an unsung hero. Quiet dedication, intellectual brilliance, and a commitment to something bigger than himself.
He shows us that greatness isn't about awards or fame. It's about using what you have to make a positive impact on the world. No matter how small it might seem, it all matters in the end.